Hey guys, how's it going? It's the King of Misfits here, and I wanted to do a video, several videos. That's a tall order saying several videos. It's like a series on the kings of Israel, the kings of Judah. Because it's very interesting. It's the Old Testament is half the Bible, over half the Bible, and it often gets overlooked. There's a lot of parts that get overlooked, and they're not really talked about. But in these that are overlooked and not talked about, there's a lot of truth to be gleaned. There's a lot of doctrine that can be found. There's a lot of examples that can be found that we can take and apply them to our own lives and apply them to our current status in the world, by which our governments rule and how things shape up and play out. Uh, these stories are to our benefit for the increasing of knowledge and wisdom in the Lord. They're examples for us to, some to live by and others to avoid like the plague. And some of them are to see and discern and understand whereby the current climate that we're in and how similar it is to that which has already been recorded in the Bible, so that we can maybe alter course, or we can at the very least see the path that we're going down so that we might alter course. And yeah, it's I'll tell you what got me onto it. I was going to do, and I still will, a video just about, it started off, I was going to do a video on every time the word Jew or Jews is mentioned in the Bible. And the first time it's mentioned is in 2 Kings 16:6. And to just go and look at the word Jew or Jews, to just read the verse that it's in does not really give you a lot of detail on what is going on. And so you really have to go back and look at the entirety of the chapter. And then when you go back and look at that entirety of that chapter, you kind of have to go before that chapter, and then maybe even also after that chapter to kind of get the whole picture of what is going on. And just in looking at the first instance of the Jews being mentioned, I thought to myself, it would be really good to do a complete dive into the kings of Israel and of Judah. And of course, when I say that, Israel was one, okay? 12 tribes, essentially 13 tribes, to divvied up from Joseph and his inheritance, okay? But later on, after David, during the time of Solomon, during the time of Solomon, after Solomon's son, the kingdom was divided. It was divided into the northern 10 tribes and the 2 southern tribes. Okay. And because of this, well, I guess kind of Levi, he would have been like throughout the entire kingdom, but the southern kingdom of Judah and Benjamin, and the northern kingdom was made up of well, you have Zebulon and Naphtali, and you've got Simeon, and you've got Ephraim and Manasseh and Dan, and oh, I'm obviously forgetting some right now because I should write them down as I say them so I can remember who I said. But anyways, you get the point. The 10 northern tribes and the southern tribes. Okay. So you get a distinction then, right? Because the southern kingdom is called Judah, right? Even though it's not just men of Judah, and the northern kingdom is called Israel, even though that's not the whole house of Israel, right? Obviously, the southern kingdom is supposed to be included in that, as they are all men of Israel. Okay, they're all men of Israel, but not all men of Israel are men of Judah. Not right. They're of their own tribes, right? They were distinct in their own tribes. You can look at the founding of the United States, for example. You know, the 13 colonies. Each one of those colonies was essentially their own country. Okay, they were the United Colonies. Well, of course. 1 second, you guys. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So, yeah. So there's a lot of stuff to look at, and we'll kind of do a mixture here of both. I kind of already explained it a little bit there, but so you have the northern kingdom, which is referred to as Israel, and then you have the southern kingdom, which is referred to as Judah. Okay, but Judah does not make up the entirety of the southern kingdom, that particular tribe, right? But Judah and the temple, right, and the main city of Jerusalem, that is in Judah, obviously. And then you have the northern kingdom, which is referred to as Israel, but that is not all of Israel. It's not the whole house of Israel. It's a divided kingdom, right? But it is referred to as Israel, as the south is referred to as Judah. Now, in 2 Kings chapter 16, we see the first instance where Jews is mentioned. Okay. And if I just read the verse, it's not going to really, it's going to have two different streams of thought. Okay. So I'll just read the verse. Okay. So 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 6, at that time, Rezin, king of Syria, recovered Elath to Syria and drave the Jews from Elath. And the Syrians came to Elath and dwelt there unto this day. So if you read that, you think, the Jews were driven from Elath because it was recovered by the king of Syria. Okay. And he kicked the Jews out, right? That's the first of the 108 countries. Okay. No, just kidding. So basically, when you look at this, the word Jews, as far as everybody today is concerned, like most people, they see the term Jews as a monolithic term, an all-encompassing term. It means all Jews. That's why you have so many people that are, anti-Bible, anti-Christian. They'll say stuff like, well, and those who call themselves Jews as well, they will say, well, you worship a Jew. You worship a Jew from a Jew book, by a Jew god. Okay. And that is just a very dishonest framing. Okay. It's just like saying, Jews saying that, well, you're anti-Semitic, right? Well, anti-Semitic, they should just say anti-Shemitic, because Shemitic is the house and lineage of Shem, and that encompasses more than just Jews. And I don't even like to use the term Jews, because Jews, that term didn't exist until what I'm reading right now in 2 Kings. And that which it's used in this case is strictly in reference to an encompassing term of the southern kingdom. They began to call them Jews. Okay. Now, after the Babylonian exile, you have the religion of the Jews beginning to form. And when I say that, I mean Judaism. I mean Talmudic Judaism, the Babylonian Talmud, which came out of Babylon. Okay. And after Babylon, you have the Persians and the Medes. So you have a Judaic religious branch that is beginning to form. And then through the Persians and the Medes, you have a political, socio-political term of Jews that is beginning to form, which is separate from that which would mean Judah, men of Judah, which is separate from including the whole house of Israel. It's specifically talking about men of Judah. And after the Babylonian captivity, it's no longer just referring to men of Judah. It's talking about a religion of the Jews. And after Persia and the Medes, it's not even referring to religious Jews that are, Hebraic, that are men of Judah, but it is a socio-political term that is made into law by the king of Persia. Okay. In the story of Esther, fear after King Artaxerxes, after he makes the decree that the Jews are allowed to go through the land, this is when Purim is created. They're allowed to go through the land, the kingdom of Persia, and kill all their enemies. It says that many of the people of the land became Jews for fear of the Jews. Now, when it says that the kingdom of Persia and were expanded, it was from India all the way to North Africa. Okay. That's a big section of land. That's a lot of peoples. And a lot of peoples converted to Judaism for religious and socio-political reasons that weren't men of Judah, that weren't worshiping the God of the Old Testament, that were worshiping the God of their fathers, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No, this is a different religion that was born out of the captivity of Babylon. Okay. So there's some major distinction to be made. So when you see 2 Kings chapter 16, when it says Jews, it's merely referring to those of the southern kingdom that were drave out of these places by the king of Syria, Rezin, king of Syria, who recovered a territory, notably Elath, and they drove the Jews, southern kingdom, men of Judah, Benjamites, out of Elath, and the Syrians dwelt there to this day. Okay? To this day being the time that the record was written. Okay? So why all of a sudden the distinction? Okay? Because before this, it always referred to as, the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. And it will continue to be such. However, in these instances, it begins to note the extra distinction between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Because what is taking place during this time is something unprecedented. You have the north fighting against the south. Okay? You have the north joining in league with former enemies, and you have the south joining in league against the north and its enemies with also other foreign countries. Okay? So that there becomes to be a even greater divide in these days. Okay? There's a lot of stuff that's going on. So then you have this distinction where you have the term Jews mentioned, which is again a all-encompassing thing, because it's not saying the king of Judah, it's talking about Jews in reference to the southern kingdom. Now, I know this is kind of a bit of the, like this, it's kind of like a running around, and it gets confusing because these words, Jews, anti-Semitic, different things that we hear nonstop today, it kind of muddies the water in the sense that how people are able to differentiate these things. It's just like when someone refers to the church, right? Or Israel. Okay. Well, the church is Israel. Okay. Not all men who claim to be of Israel are of Israel. Not all men who claim to be of the church, claim to be Christian, are actually Christian. Which Christian denomination? Okay. You got all these different things that will subjugate these terms, these words. And you can't just put them in a one size fits all umbrella. You can for generality's sake, but then you also have to peel back the layers of the onion to fully understand what is actually being spoken of and what is actually meant, right? Because there will be people that will call, all of Christendom, right? And they'll include, the Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, Protestant churches, etc. But then you'll ask somebody else and they'll say Christianity, and then they'll say the Catholic Church, and they won't even be included. They'll be different. They'll be literally divided. There'll be the Christians and there'll be the Catholics. Okay. And then you'll have someone like the Eastern Orthodox. They'll say, well, none of them are Christian unless they're Eastern Orthodox. Right. So there's a lot of differentiating that needs to be done, and generalities are good in instances. They prove the rule, most of the time. But then there are exemptions where these exceptions, again, further prove the rule of the generality. So when it comes to the word Jews, there needs to be some distinction. There needs to be some exemptions made, exceptions, but there's a general rule that you can go by. Okay? But even in today's world, that general rule is a little bit tricky, because even today, we call people Jews who are in fact not Jews. Okay? So I hope this has helped to further confuse you. No, I hope it's kind of cleared things up a little bit. I'm not going to go into the whole thing right now about what was going on, but I just wanted to make a short video, somewhat explaining it. I'll go into this a little bit later and further explain it, but for now I'm going to end the recording. So thank you, and King of Misfits out.